That was in 1945. Okay, and in 1945, there was, you know, a common understanding that such a thing, such a horror like the Second World War should never happen again. Yeah? So, what are the two resources do you think that you need in order to have a war, to you know, wage a warfare? What do you need in order to make a war? Which resources are very important, you know, to build arms and weapons? What do you think is very important?
Men and resources.
Which one?
And resources like metal.
Yeah, very good, super. Yes, so metal, yeah, because you need to build tanks, you know, and weapons. You need metal, yeah. And how is that? So you need coal and steel, yeah. Coal and steel. From those resources, you could produce metal and arms, yeah. So exactly, and then the idea back then was, after Second World War, while if you can manage those two resources, not on a national level but on an international level. So if you manage those resources on an international level, then you would be able to avoid anything like the Second World War. And that was the idea back then, to create the European Union. Yeah, the foundation was the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. Yeah, you see here, Paris, 1951, signed by Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and West Germany. Yeah, and that was the idea. There should never be anything like the Second World War ever again. Yeah. And that was basically the idea, yeah. And then we had some other, and that's now you do not know that, yeah, because you know that's just for you that you have heard it once, yeah. So then we had several communities that developed further. There was started as a European coal steel community and a European community, and that all developed into finally the Treaty of 1992. That was the Treaty on European Union, signed in Maastricht, that's in Netherlands. And with that treaty, the European Union was set up. Yeah, Maastricht, 1992. Yeah. And the last time the Treaty of the European Union was reformed was in the year 2007 by the Reform Treaty. Yeah. And remember, treaty, that's why it's so important that we had the introduction to international law, because now you know what a treaty is, right? A treaty is a written agreement between states or international organizations. And this treaty was a treaty between the states that take part in the European Union. So those states created, they signed a written agreement, the treaty on the European Union. Now we have 27 member states. 27, we already had been 28, but in 1 year ago, the United Kingdom left. So now we are left with 27 member states. Okay, so much just for a very brief introduction in the history. Yeah. What are now the important features? So you have to understand, and that's now important. Yeah, you have to understand. An international organization, you know, we talked about international organizations, next to the states. An international organization can pass laws, so they can make laws that bind only the states that are member in that international organization. Yeah? So when, for example, the United Nations is a very famous, important and important international organization, when they pass a law, then that law of that international organization can only bind the states. It can only put obligations on the states, not on the human beings in the states. But they just bind the states. Yeah, that's an international organization. And now the European Union is not an international, not just an international organization, it is a supranational organization. Supranational organization. That means it can make laws that bind even the human beings directly in the member states. I'll give you an example. Is there anything in Vietnam like a minimum wage? Is there anything like that? A minimum wage? No, it's sunny right now. Great. A minimum wage. Is there anything like that in Vietnam? You know, minimum wage means that if you work, that you are entitled, so you have the right to get at least a minimum amount for an hour of work. You know what I mean? Yeah. So for every hour that you work, you should get at least a certain amount, and no one is allowed to pay you less than that. That's a minimum wage. Is there anything like that in Vietnam? Do you know that?
I don't know.
So there was a discussion in Austria, and there are lots of member states that have such a law, yeah, that tells you if you are an employer, yeah, and you hire someone, an employee, yeah, and you hire someone, and that person works for you, then you have to pay that person at least, so minimum, at least a certain amount of money per hour, not less. And there is a discussion in European Union whether there should be such a rule on European level, because some member states have it, some member states don't. So the idea was maybe the discussion is, should there be a minimum wage on European level? But the problem is that the prices and the living standards, the costs for living, and the salary, the amounts of salaries that you get around Europe is so different. This varies so much. So, for example, if you work in Sweden or in Finland, you get a high salary because living is so expensive there. It's really very expensive. You pay at least 3 times the amount for a pizza or the double. So a pizza in Austria costs, let's say, 10 euros, and in Finland and Sweden it's 20 euros. And in Romania and Bulgaria it's probably 4 euros. So that is such a big difference that it's really not possible to agree on a minimum wage, right? Because there's just too much difference in the levels of the in the salary levels of the countries. I guess that would be probably also the case, if you take Vietnam and the surrounding countries, right? There's also, I guess, also the living costs and the costs for food and all that varies very much if you are in Vietnam or other countries around or in your neighboring countries. Is that true? No.
Yes.
You see, so that's why it would be not possible to have such a minimum wage. Also, if there was a community with your neighboring countries. So, however, now we assume there was such a thing as a minimum wage in the European Union. Yeah? If there was such a thing, then the European Union could pass a law saying there is a minimum wage of, let's say, 10 euros. Yeah? That law could be directly applicable to the human beings. So that means if I have an employer who pays me less than 10 euros, I could directly go to court, yeah, and sue that person, my employer, in court, and I could I could explain my wish for 10 euros directly because of that European law. So I'm entitled, directly entitled, because there is that European law, to sue my employer in court, say you have to pay me 10 euros because there is that European law and I'm entitled to that. Why? Because that law would be could be directly applicable to me as a member of the European Union. Normally, in international organizations, if in an international organization, the people agree, or the states that are members in that international organization, if they agree, for example, then every member state of that international organization has to make an own national law. So if that was not a supranational organization like the European Union, if we spoke of an international organization, they would have to transpose that minimum wage into a national law. So Austria would be obliged to make a national law because they cannot make a law that is directly applicable to the human beings. Only the member states are bound. Only they are obliged, but not the human beings directly. Okay, that's the difference. Is that understandable? Was it clear? So again, in an international organization, yeah, an international organization like the United Nations, for example, they can pass a law that binds only the members of the United Nations, the states, and then the states are obliged. So it's the duty of the states to make a national law to achieve that goal. So if they agree on a minimum wage, then all member states would have the obligation, so they must make a national, like an Austrian law, a Vietnamese law, a US law, a Italian law, who is member in that international organization. They make national laws. Yeah? So if I'm an employee and I get less than 10 euros, I would have to wait for Austria to make an Austrian law saying 10 euros minimum wage. And only if Austria makes that law, only then I'm entitled to that money, yeah, or to that 10 euros now. But the European Union, they could make laws that directly are applicable not to the states, to the member states of the European Union, but to the people in the European Union themselves. So to me, yeah, so I would be directly entitled. I could go to court, say, there's the European law that tells me, that entitles me to 10 euros an hour, and you do not pay me 10 euros. So I sue you. I go to court. Okay? And that's why the European Union is a supranational organization, and the United Nations, for example, is an international organization. The European Union is a supranational organization. Clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. And I would like to tell you, I would like to talk about the principle of conferral. Yeah, you see here the third bullet points. Yeah. Have in mind that the European Union has only competence, has only the power to make laws in the areas that were transferred to the European Union by the member states. Yeah. In all other areas, all other competences remain with the member states. Yeah. Okay. So, for example, I give you an example. Yeah? Certain areas of taxation, yeah, to pay taxes. Yeah? Certain areas of taxation are competences of the European Union, but other areas of the taxes, for example, how much I, as a human being, pay income tax in Austria, income tax is left to the national member states. So that's not a competence of the European Union. So in the treaties to found the European Union, all the competences of the European Union are listed. And what is not listed remains with the member states. So then the member states are completely free to decide on their own how they want to solve or how they want to regulate that area. Yeah. Okay. And that is called the principle of conferral. Principle of conferral means the EU shall act only within the limits of the competences conferred by the treaties. And all the other competences remain with the member states. Yeah. Only what is listed in the treaty to found the European Union, all the competences of the European Union are listed in this treaty. What is not listed remains with the member states. I skip this one. That's too detailed. And I would like, let's see. I'm thinking that I should start that again. I will show you. Let's do it this way. Next time, okay. So next session, we speak. I give you a short idea. So we have our next session tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow, I would like to talk to you about about the sources of European law, or no, because yeah, about the sources of European law. You know, we already had the sources of international law, right? Remember that we talked about that today. Yeah. So the sources of European law are different from the sources of international law, of course. So we talk about the sources. Then we talk about the important European institutions. That's especially the European Council, then Commission, Parliament, Council, the European Court of Justice, different from the International Court of Justice. Yeah. So we'll talk about the institutions, and then we will talk about. Okay, we have that. And then we talk about the internal market. Okay, so those are the three areas that we will talk about tomorrow. Yeah? So you're all also interesting then. Okay, so my plan is, and that's our goal for tomorrow. The goal for tomorrow is we finish the session about European Union law, okay, about the European Union. And then we have only one session left, virtual classroom, and then we have one session e-learning at the end, okay? So it's not so much time left for us. We've already covered a lot of, you know, if you think about, we've already heard a lot of stuff. And I know that, you know, international law is, if you have not yet had anything to do with it, which is normally the case, you know, if you're so young and you might, I mean, there are not many relations with international law, right? So that's, I completely understand that it's at the beginning, it's a little bit hard. So, but if you think of that, we have already covered a lot of ground actually. So we have the introduction to law, we have finished. We have international law, introduction to international law. We have finished that one. We will finish European law tomorrow. And then we have one session left in which we will either do the United Nations or another topic. I will think about that. Okay. Please. Really take the last, we have still 40 minutes left, okay? Please take the time to go through that what we have done today. I think it's always very helpful to review at the end, to review what we have done, okay? And again, at the beginning, it's a little bit complicated, but if you go through it on your own, in your own time, in your own pace, I'm sure you will do fine. Okay?
Yes.
So have a great evening.